Hello. Tonight's Australian story is about a young man I first met a few years ago as part of a youth delegation that turned up in my office. Heath Ducker has overcome enormous obstacles and challenges to become a leader and a role model for young people who've had a troubled past. The obstacle of youth poverty has steeled his determination to do something to help the underprivileged in our community. He's succeeded, and he's even knocking on my door after my job. And this is his story.
I was very young when I realised that we were looked upon as a needy family. You knew that you were from a disadvantaged background, and you knew that you were poor. And it made you feel like an outsider, like you didn't fit in, like I didn't fit in. Probably it was unsaid, but there wasn't much of a future for us because everyone knew our background and the struggles that we had at home. I think there was something inside of me that said, I don't want to accept this situation. I don't want to settle for what people think of me. I knew that I wanted to get out and above that. It really annoyed me that people would judge me. Even as a young person, I remember thinking this, that people would judge me because of the background I came from and limit my ability or potential based on that. And whenever somebody tells me I can't do something, it puts me on more of a mission to want to achieve it. Growing up, I was the second eldest of 10 children. I share a father with my younger brother, but all my other brothers and sisters have a different father.
Fiji's are very scientific and the koalas eat them.
There was one father who stuck around for a while. He never lived with us. There was no father that ever lived in the house. He was just around sometimes on the weekends. Grew up in an old housing commission home. Really run down. I remember the windows being broken and not being fixed for years, especially the one in my room. I remember going to sleep at night without a blanket, not being able to find a towel. And I remember going home after school many times and not finding anything in the fridge to eat or in the cupboard. I used to eat cereal a lot, cereal for breakfast, cereal for dinner.
Overcast like this.
Yeah, should be good swimming weather. I was very fortunate when I was about 9 years of age to have been assigned an auntie and uncle through the Aunties and Uncles program. Couples who give you sort of respite care on the weekends and other times if it's required.
Okay, shall we do our stuff here?
I spent a lot of weekends with Alan and Kathy, and it was good because I saw the normal workings of a household. Alan and Kathy would wash their clothes on the weekend and iron them, and I was provided with meals. So it just gave me a bit of an insight to what a sort of normal household is like.
We didn't have children, we couldn't have children, and for us that was a way of having a family. So he was the son we never had. We used to race up and down the pool. Loved the pool. He was very good in the swimming at school, and he got me timing him up and down the pool one stage in his school career. And we still enjoy that, and later on we played squash. And I'd like to beat him and he'd like to beat me. I mean, they were a bit competitive.
It's not too cold, is it?
Oh, beautiful.
It's much better than I thought it would be.
The day that we met Heath, he was 9, and we met him with his mother in a local park. I felt very nervous. Neither of us had children, so we were feeling, well, is this child going to take to us or not? And then I heard Heath say to his friend, "That's my auntie and uncle there." And it was a great moment, and it was a great beginning for us. At 9 years old, he's pretty inquiring, wants to learn, and I suppose that's the approach we took. Encourage him to do things, especially around the home. I've got great memories of Alan getting him to help, and slowly he joined in the activity with Alan, I suppose just like a father and son would.
He'd join in and meet our friends and their kids, and I think he enjoyed that. He really enjoyed being part of just a family network around the pool, barbecue, and that was a normal family life, and he'd probably never had that before.
I guess I was probably angry with my circumstances, angry with the situation that I was living in. I used to fight with my brothers and sisters, I used to fight with my mum a lot, and so most of my happiness was placed outside of the home, and that's where I tried to spend most of my time. Because I'd been sexually abused when I was 12, I had never spoken about it, and I'd kept it to myself, kept it inside. And it was the first time that I realised really what was going on and what had actually happened to me. I remember the first time that it happened, and I was walking home from school that day, and I used to walk home by myself. And I remember walking along the park, and I walked up and over this hill and under this bridge. And this car was waiting there. And I looked and I thought, oh yeah, I recognise that car. And I walked up and, it was my friend's father, and he sort of leaned his head out the window and said, "Oh, hi Heath, how are you going? I noticed you're having a bit of troubles with your friendship with my son," because at the time, it wasn't anything major, but I was sort of having little arguments with my mate who was his son. And so I got into the car, and he sort of drove me around the neighbourhood and down this street, which isn't too far from my home. And he did it there. That's the first time it happened. I didn't know what I should do about it. I really just didn't understand it. I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't understand it. I didn't feel a great need for him to be punished, but I did feel the need that society should be protected. And I remember him sitting there like this. He was afraid, he was scared, he was like shaking like that. I remember seeing him like that, then looking into his eyes, which is a good thing to do first because it took the power back. And I saw a human being. I saw somebody who was afraid of what might happen to him. It was that moment I just forgave him. I forgave him for what he did to me. And anything that I'd ever felt about the experience, the pain, the guilt, the shame, the sadness, it just left me at that moment. And it was gone. I didn't have to deal with it anymore. He only got weekend detention, but it was a couple of years. I made up my mind, probably my first or second camp, that I wanted to do something with my life. I wanted to be something, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me from doing that. I realised that one of the only ways I was going to get there was to study and get a university education. I couldn't study in the house, so what I decided to do was to actually climb up onto the roof, and I used to do my study there. Home was such a difficult environment. There was chaos with all the kids running around, babies crying, arguments carrying on, no room. My mum used to always be going through difficulty, and my older brother ran away for 4 years and we didn't know where he was, we couldn't find him, and there was all this trauma, going on in the life, and it was depressing, and I wanted to get out of it.
When Heath became a little older in his teenage years, and when he was trying to get homework done, he probably spent more time with us. I wondered whether we should have made the offer to have him stay more permanently. But at the end of the day, I know that his mother really loved that family, and she worked very hard to keep that family together.
We decided we'd do everything we could to help him get his HSC. I'd been to high school presentation days with Jenny, and she wanted her son to achieve. And it was actually a conversation with the high school principal who said, look, in my experience, kids from this kind of background do not get HSC. So that was the motivation, the spur for me and Kathy to say, OK, we'll help Heath. So he came to us 1 weekend a month, and then in the HSC year, he came in the weekdays, so Monday through to Friday.
The most time I ever spent at Alan and Kathy's home was during my HSC year. I mean, that was really vital. I wouldn't have been able to get into uni if it wasn't for them.
It's the breakdown of our families, not having a mum and a dad, that is causing our society to rot from the bottom up.
I was invited to speak at conferences, and one of them being the state's magistrates. I spoke at a conference there about youth and crimes and alternatives to the justice system. And I was, on the basis of this, invited to meet with the Prime Minister. Ron and I went up there and spoke to the Prime Minister about, youth affairs, and I remember sitting in the office and thinking, well, what a contrast, I grew up in this poverty, and I've been sexually abused, and here I am a few years later sitting in the office of the Prime Minister of the country discussing youth affairs and youth issues. I jog a lot around my local neighbourhood in preparation for Kokoda. The first time I went to Kokoda was when I was in high school. Charlie Lynn, who's a Member of Parliament in New South Wales, decided to take them over for a leadership experience. What Kokoda is really about is the ability for the human spirit to overcome adversity. I think of the experiences that I've had, the abuse or whatever, and I think if I can do that, if I can overcome those experiences, there's nothing that I can't overcome. There's no reason why I can't get up this mountain.
Well, what sort of pain have you got?
Unfortunately, midway I tore a chest muscle, so I was actually evacuated midway. But that wasn't to worry, because I never like to leave anything unfinished. But I always knew that I'd go back and I'd do it again, and I've more than proven that by going back as a Trek leader.
I now call on the head of School of Law, to present the testamers.
Heath Ducker.
I was extremely proud to graduate from university and walk along that stage and receive my certificate, because everything in my life would have provided me for an excuse not to do that.
I'm very proud to have watched that journey.
And declare you.
Friends sometimes say to me, where do you think he'll end up? And I say, well, I can see him going two ways.
Graduated.
Number one, doing something very active in human rights, or he'll end up as Prime Minister.
Well done.
If you treat someone as they are, that's how they're going to stay. But if you treat somebody as who you want them to become, or how they should become, then often they can rise to that. Oh! If you live in poverty, the money you get from welfare isn't a lot, and also you've got to be able to manage it. So I think in some ways Mum wasn't able to apply that money properly. The more kids that come, the more brothers and sisters we had, the more difficult it got. And they do experience the same struggles that I have, and I feel for them. Hopefully, the fact that I've gone out and I've achieved and I've not let anything hold me back will show them that they can do the same.
Special brand or dirt and smudges.
Mum is the way she is today because of the experiences she had when she was young. Growing up, she had some negative experiences and they've carried on through her life. From my mum, I think I've inherited a sense of compassion, a sense of understanding and the importance of the value of love, I think. Mum asks me sometimes, was I a bad mother? Did I not do well? I've always said and I always believed that she did the best she could, and she has nothing really to regret in that way. It's just the way it was, you know. The greatest difficulty I continue to have is that there's still that challenge every day to overcome my background. You have to fight against a judgment your whole life. No matter what you've achieved, people still look at you and where you've come from. But I'll tell you something, the experiences that I've had in the home that I've grew up in have made me who I am, and I'm happy to be who I am today. Despite everything I've been through and the barriers that I've had, I've been able to secure a job at Gaydon's law firm, which is a top 10 law firm in the country. And that's been my whole purpose of the things that I've done over the years, is to convince society that these things don't have to be shackles. And perhaps having this achievement, among all the others that I've done, is one of the final steps in shaking those shackles off my own past. One of my major goals in my life is to actually get married and have a family and become a good father. And that will signal the fact that I've completely broken the cycle.